Bectran heard me give back in the spring at the CMA's CreditScape conference in California. And the genesis of this presentation, data, information, and knowledge, and how important it is in the credit and collection process, came out of a conversation that I had with the president of the CMA, Mike Mitchell, around some of the challenges that AGA had been facing in handling the collections for the CMA members. And AGA, we're a third-party commercial collection agency. We've been around for 40 years, and we are the exclusive outsourcing partner for the CMA. And we were talking about some of the challenges that we have with some of their members being smaller companies, companies that are in the $20, $30 million range, and not having access to the information that we needed, our collectors needed, to successfully pursue their accounts receivable that they were placing with us. And, you know, that conversation turned into him saying to me, hey, Sam, would you be willing to come out to our conference and share your thoughts and background around the value of having easy access to data and the importance of it in the credit and collection decisioning process? And so that's sort of how this presentation came to be. And the basis of the presentation is how can companies leverage technology to increase the speed and efficiency which your staff gathers transactional data on your customers and makes it available to your organization, whether it's finance, whether it's sales, whether it's customer service, as well as to the third-party providers that you may engage with to help you in different areas of the credit and collection process. So that's sort of the thought behind this presentation. Like, how can you use technology to help you do this and access this information? And then we're going to talk about, you know, why do you need this data and what's the importance to it? We're then going to talk about what data do you actually need, and then where do you put the data? Where do you store it? You know, I'm a big believer that data is knowledge, and this little image that you see here, all right, data turns into information and knowledge. Knowledge is power, and whether you're making a financial decision, credit risk decision, you're collecting money, whether you're selling a product or service, having information is extremely important. And what I have seen in my 25 years of experience in the credit and collection space is that many times credit and collection departments don't have easy access to the data that they need. And if we were in an open presentation right now, I'd be asking a question and asking people to put up their hands to say, you know, how many of you actually have easy access to every single piece of data that you need in order to do your job? And when I gave this presentation back in March, I was pretty sure that maybe 1 or 2 people out of a room of about 70 put their hands up. And so let's talk about data in credit and collections. And take in mind, you know, I've never been a credit manager. I've provided products and services to the credit and collection community for close to 25 years. But in every role that I've had, in every interaction that I've had with credit and collection folks, data has always been a central focus to it. So the role of credit and collections is to extend and approve customers, set credit limits, manage customers, collect payments, manage and resolve disputes, apply cash, and probably a whole bunch of other things that I didn't list right here, right? Every one of these activities requires you having access to data to help that function work smoothly, right? Everything that you do in your day in, day out routine requires some sort of data to help you with your process, right? But once again, as I said before, many times credit departments don't have easy access to the data they need. Yes, if your company's put in some, you know, some of the state-art systems, SAP, Oracle, and we'll talk about that in a moment, you may have access to everything. But over the last 25 years, and I've seen a big transformation during my business career, even today, some of the biggest companies that I talk to, their credit and collection departments do not have easy access to data on their customers. And once again, we'll do some case studies and talk about that in a moment. So let's talk about data. You know, what kind of data do you need? When do you need it? So when do you typically have to look at data in your customer process? So let's look at it from start to finish, the life cycle, right? Approving a new customer, managing an ongoing customer, and then collecting from a former customer. If I had to look at the customer life cycle from start to finish, the new customer, the ongoing customer, and the former customer, all right? So each one of these different stages of the life cycle, you may need different data. So let's start off by talking about the new customer. And quite honestly, how I became associated with the folks at Bectran was over the new customer, because they were showing me when I met them at this conference their credit application processing platform, which I thought was fantastic. And so we started talking about data as it relates to new customers, right? And so whenever somebody signs on a new customer, and I've got clients of mine that range from $1 million, $2 million companies up to, the largest companies in the world like Google and Microsoft. And what I find is that the spectrum ranges very broadly in the type of information that they typically want to gather from a new customer. Some companies gather very little data. Other companies gather a lot of data. Now, we always would say that more data is better, and so when we look at the new customer approval process, the first thing it usually starts off with is a credit application. And typically, most credit applications are going to require a certain certain amounts of information on your customer in order for you to set them up in your system, for you to approve them for credit, whether there's references being given, tax ID numbers, personal guarantees, whatever that information is, right? That information is really important to you in the entire customer life cycle. So look at the credit application and all the data that's on the credit application. Look at the contract that you may have with your customer and all the data that's on that contract, the personal guarantee that you may sign with your customer, right? Information related to your ability to collect collection fees if your debt doesn't get paid. The credit report that you pull on your customer in order to make your decision and to help you evaluate their creditworthiness. The financial information you may get if they're a public company or a large enough private company where you're able to get financials. UCC information, lien information, if you have security interest. All this data that you may have to gather while you're making a decision to do business with a company, it's all really important data, and it's data that's going to help you in the entire life cycle of managing this customer, right? So that's the new customer. All that data, well, that data is all data you want to collect and you want to have access to, and we're going to talk in a moment about how you get that data and what you're going to leverage it for. But obviously, if you're going to make a decision on a new customer, you need to have a certain amount of data. If you were using the Bectran platform and your sales rep was on the road filling out a credit application, they require a certain amount of data so that they can then go through the process of making an approval and setting a credit limit for a company. So let's look at that new information. And then let's look at the information once they are a customer and now you're doing business with them, all right? Because typically what we find is that data is used in the beginning to make an approval on a new customer, and then it's also used on an ongoing basis to determine, is the customer worthy of the credit you've extended to them, or should they be giving more credit, or should they be getting less credit? So what data do you use to evaluate an ongoing customer? So let's look at the ongoing evaluation of creditworthiness. What kind of data you typically look at? So one of the things that I always think is really important is your payment information. What is the performance of this customer with you over time? Prior to joining AGA, I worked for a company called Predictive Metrics. We built models that help predict the probability of customers becoming delinquent in the future. That information, I'm going to take you through a case study in a couple moments. That information was information that we needed historical data in order to build these models. So do you have access to this data? But your own payment information is the greatest indication of future performance. Your past performance with your customers and the data that you have around that is the best indication of future performance, right? So do you have access and can you use the predictive payment data that's in your database? Are you getting updated credit information? I know that a lot of the credit information services have the ability to routinely update you on your customers, whether it's being updated with alerts being emailed to you about changes in their credit file, or getting a full update on a consistent basis, or scoring them from a creditworthiness standpoint on an ongoing basis. That data that you get from the credit bureau is also very important information and data. And then it's your customer transaction data that you typically are going to get out of your internal systems, your ERP system, your legacy system, your billing system, your collection software system. But that customer transactional data is important. You want to know how much business you're doing with a customer. How profitable are they? Are they an easy customer to work with? So looking at things like statements, invoices, proof of deliveries, bill of ladings, dispute documentation, collection activity, your own internal collection activity of how you are managing the customer relationship, payment performance, how is your customer paying you, right? This is data that you need to have access to in order to consistently evaluate your customer's creditworthiness and the relationship in which you have, right? So very important data to have. And then now you get to the last stage. They're no longer a customer. They stop doing business with you. They owe you money, right? Now you've placed the customer with a collection agency, whether it's AGA or whoever your partner is. Now your collection agency, well, they can't go out and collect your debt unless they know something about the relationship you had with the customer. And so that's going to require you to take a lot of this information that we've just reviewed and get it to your collection agency in some shape, manner, or form, all right? And they need this information day one so they can act up on your behalf as quickly as possible. So, number one, a current statement of your account. Number two, copies of your invoices. Number three, a copy of your credit application that is signed. And once again, you can only add fees to debt collection if there is a notification in the credit application or in a guarantee or on a contract that says you're entitled to add fees. So can you give that information to your agency day one? Do you have copies of all of your orders? Do you have a copy of your contract? Many companies have different systems that they have to go through to get this data, and is that information available to you? Because your collection partner can't go collect your money or successfully collect it without having access to this data, because 90% of the time, the first call that a collection agency makes, the first thing that they are asked for is for a copy of an invoice or a statement. And so when your collection agency gets your customer on the phone finally after 10 tries, the last thing you want them to do is have to now call you up to get a copy of that statement or invoice because you couldn't deliver it to them. So it's important information to have access to, especially when you're now trying to recover the money that your customer owes you, that you sent them goods based on other data and now you can't collect. So having access to this data is very, very important. All right, so what we just reviewed is the data that you may need in each stage of the customer life cycle, all right? And many times what I just took you through, it's not rocket science. If you've been in credit and collections for a while, this is all things that you've seen, you've heard about. But here's really the challenge that I've seen is, where is this data located? How can you get access to it? Do you have easy access to it? And if you do have easy access to it, do you then have the ability to do something with it, to export it, to download it, to transfer it in some way, shape, manner, or form to whoever you need to send it to? So where is your data located? Typically, most companies, it's in either your ERP system or your legacy system, whatever software system that you're using to manage your business is typically where your data is located. If you are in a current ERP environment, SAP, Oracle, PeopleSoft, JD Edwards, well, many times what you'll find is that those systems, they were developed to make it somewhat easy to get access to your data. Many times our own clients, they won't send us their data. They will give us access through a web portal into SAP, Oracle, their billing system. If they're using something like BillTrust or other EIPP systems, we can get access to that. But typically what we find is that your data is going to be located typically in your ERP system, all right, which is obviously you're going to have your core data from your company there, and you may have all your sales data, you may have all your billing information, but typically what you'll find is that the data is in that ERP system, or if you're using bolt-on software, whether it's a tool like Bectran to manage the credit and collections process from the onboarding credit applications, or it's maybe a software application that is just doing your collection software, or maybe it's your credit bureau software that you're using. Maybe you're using something like DMBI to help manage your portfolio. Each one of these systems is housing data on your customers, all right? And you should have easy access to those systems in order to access that data, because if you want to efficiently do your job, well, you got to have access to it. But this is one of the challenges we've seen, is that many times credit departments don't have easy access to this data. I was with a company recently where they keep their data in 5 different systems. And so if you wanted to, say, place an account for collection, You got to go to 5 different places in order to get all the data that is needed in order to successfully go after that customer for the debt that they're owed. So it many times can be a challenge. The other thing is that many times you also want to be able to give your partners access to your data. Whether it's your collection agency or it's your credit association or it is one of the credit bureaus, all right, many times your providers need access to your data. So if it's a software provider, it's a bolt-on, a service like a Bectran, well, they're going to have to be able to tie into your systems in order to access the data they need to run their application. So how do you provide this access to your software providers, credit bureaus? If you do credit scoring, you got to pull data out of your systems in order to run those scores. So, you know, you got to be able to provide that access, and whether that's working with your IT department or your company set up in a way that you have the ability to do it yourself, all right, you're at some point going to probably have to give access to your data to somebody, all right, and therefore you want to have, you know, the wherewithal to do it. So your data, once again, very important. Where it's located is important, and having access to it is important. So what I want to talk about, since I just threw a lot of information at you in the last 20 minutes, is I want to talk with you, I'll show you 3 quick case studies that talk about the value and the need for data. And all these case studies are at different sort of time periods. And so I'm going to take you back in time to the 1990s. All right, to me, it doesn't seem like that long ago. In 1996, I was involved with starting a company called Credit Risk Monitor. After the service was really designed to analyze publicly held companies, but we wanted to grow the company and start analyzing privately held companies. And so back in 1996, we started working with some of the NACM trade associations as well as with our own clients in trying to gather payment data, all right, trade tape data from them. Now think back, this is 1996, the internet is very new, all right, we don't have all the storage capacities that we have now, we don't have the flash drives, we don't have the ability to just download large batches of data into something like Dropbox, right? And at Credit Risk Monitor, we were reaching out to hundreds of companies trying to get them to do what they were doing with D&B, which was send us their trade tapes. Well, we would get trade tapes that would come in 25 different formats, very hard to read, but we also knew that if we couldn't handle this data, then we couldn't create the product that we were looking to create, which was a private company reporting service. And because this data was so focused on payment data, and back then, if you think back to 1996, for those of you who were in credit back then, how many of you had easy access to export your trade tape, your month-end aging, into even an Excel spreadsheet back then, or into a CSV file? Right? And so when Credit Risk Monitor was trying to develop the service around privately held companies that they have today, it started 20 years ago, and it was extremely difficult to get that data. It was actually painstaking. We at one point cut a deal with an NACM affiliate that was basically 12 affiliates had created a sort of association, and they actually shipped their AS400 to our office in Long Island in order to manage the data. Now, think about that now. Here we are 20 years later and having to ship a very large computer system to somebody in order to be able to read data, right? That's what had to happen back in 1996. It was extremely challenging, and once again, we couldn't build the product without it. So showing that in order to create a product for the credit market that required a lot of data, it was a real challenge, and therefore, you know, it was something that was very difficult, but we were able to successfully do it. It just became labor-intensive, time-consuming, and overall expensive. Second case study is prior to joining AG Adjustments, I worked for a company called Predictive Metrics, and we were acquired by SunGard in 2011. SunGard is now FIS. They're the company that has the Get Paid collection software. And we built models that helped analyze large pools of payment data to help look at a customer's portfolio of their accounts and predict what is the probability that a good paying customer is going to become a delinquent paying customer at some point during the next 6 months. But in order to run these models, you had to get 2 years of historical month-end aging data out of a company's system, right? So whether it was their AS400, SAP, Oracle, QuickBooks, their collection system, whatever it was, in order to build these models, you had to have 2 years of data. Well, when I joined the company back in 2005, and I started going out and reaching out to companies in the industry and saying, hey, can you get me this data? Very few of them were able to push a button and export the data that they needed in order to run these models. Now, the models are extremely valuable. They help predict very, very accurately the payment performance of your customer portfolio. However, you couldn't run the models, you couldn't build the models unless you had this data. And we had so many companies that wanted to do this, but the credit departments just did not have the ability to go to their IT guys and say, hey guys, I need 2 years of historical end-of-month aging data and get it like the snap of their fingers. Yeah, and that was a big challenge. We couldn't sell them a service unless they had the data, and we couldn't show them the value. Now, those who got us the data, painstakingly, they were able to see the value. But in order to build these really valuable models, you needed to have company data that was not easily accessible, and once again, showing that if you want to do something and you want to move forward, you got to have the data to help you do it. And then the last case study I'll give you is related to my current experience today at AG Adjustments, and I've shared a little bit with you as we've gone through the presentation. But as a collection agency, many times, we're the last thing that our clients think of when they're looking at the overall scope of their business. We're at the bottom of the barrel. They call us bottom feeders. However, for a bottom feeder to be successful, they need data. We need information. We need information to help us collect from the company that has been submitted to us. So what information that we need most of the time is, as I said earlier, a credit application, invoices, statements, all right? And then what we also want to know is the communication that you had with your customer previously. So if you accepted a check and it bounced, well, we want to know that. But many times we don't get that data from our clients. They don't give us the notes out of their systems. They just provide us with a statement of the account. Well, once again, if you want your partner to be successful, giving them as much information as possible to help them do their job is going to make them more successful. However, what we know is that many times our clients, their hands are tied because they don't have easy access to the notes that are in their collection system and export them into a file and send them to us. Now, some systems very easily can do that, but other systems can't. And so therefore, it becomes a challenge. And so what we have found is that our clients who are forward-thinking, who have access to their IT department, who have good systems in place that have export capabilities, typically are able to do things quicker, faster, and have better results because of the speed in which they're able to access the data that they need in order to perform the tasks that they have to be a good credit and collection professional. All right, so to finish, and I think I'm running about 30 minutes right now, Eric, and this is the last slide. I thought it was going to be about 30 minutes long. Many times, everything that I took you through today, most of what I took you through requires somebody to champion, many times, a product or service that will help you, either aggregate this data or give you access to this data. And whether it's buying a service or a tool like Bectran, or whether it is an order-to-cash application, or whether it is a service from one of the credit bureaus, no matter what the product or service, many times because credit departments are viewed as cost centers, how do you get the tools that you need? That should be need, not net. I got a little typo in my slide. So first thing is, when you are looking at your department and trying to make improvements, you have to figure out, what is the problem you're looking to solve, and then what is the right solution for that particular problem. So let's say you were trying to automate your credit application processing, and you identified that Bectran was the company that you wanted to use. Well, now you got to go build a case for management as to why you need this service. So you got to build a business case, right, that has to detail the value that the product or service brings to your organization. Right? It's got to have a breakdown of the cost of it, and then you have to have an ROI performed to see how long is the payback going to be in order to recoup the money that you've invested in this product or service. And what you really should do in either case, in my mind, is because credit departments are looked at as expense centers, is to position whatever you're looking to do as a profit driver and as an expense reducer. That if you get access to this data and you can then use it inside of this tool, that's going to help you guys increase profits and reduce overall expenses. reduce your cost of collection. So, many times credit folks don't have easy access to go out and spend $10,000, $20,000 on a tool. So if you're going to go down that path, be prepared. Typically, your partner and your vendor will help you with that. But you got to have a good business case for it. But once again, in my mind, data is extremely important. And if you're looking at how to make improvements, then many times you're going to be looking at data. And if you can't have access to the data that you need, then many times you're not going to be able to make the improvements that you want to. So, data is extremely important in the day-to-day operations of credit and collections. All right, Eric, that's my 30 minutes.
Great, I appreciate it, Sam. So I'm going to unmute everyone in a second, but I think that the one thing from my point of view that you shared insight to that I think everyone would benefit from is the following question, Sam. When talking to a lot of my customers about their collection issues, there's a certain emotional attachment to their AR portfolio. They have trouble letting it go to a third-party collection service. It's my customer, my balance owed. And often they hold on to it too long, too far, so that it's hard for a person like you to come in and act upon it. What would you tell someone to kind of give them perspective on, at what point should they, ask for help, and, how they can, save face and maintain their own stand within a company if they basically say, hey, I need help with my collections? Yep,
good question, Eric. And once again, this is not a pitch for AGA in any way. I'm just going to answer this in a very general way. The older a debt is, the less collectible it becomes. There's statistics that have been put out by various trade associations around the probability of collecting once a debt hits 90 days, 120 days, 150 days, 180 days, and so forth. What we normally say as rule of thumb is that if your customer has been unresponsive, that they're not ordering, there's no communication with sales, and this has gone on for 60 to 90 days, then you probably have reached your internal point of no return. Now, you're right, Eric. Many companies don't want to place something with a collection agency because, one, it's almost admitting failure. You extended the credit, you gave them the credit, you started doing business, and now you can't collect the money that you put out on the street. But, that's a cost of doing business. That's a reality in life. Everybody takes risks. And at some point, you aren't going to be able to collect from a customer, and it shouldn't be a personal situation. It shouldn't be an emotional attachment. It should be a business decision. And what we normally say is 90 days, no call, no payment, you're probably not going to be successful collecting it on your own. And really, here's what winds up happening, Eric, is that, it's the low-hanging fruit syndrome. Most companies, when their customers get to 90, 120, 150, 180 days past due, they've already spent, 3 months working on them. And when it gets out here, they've got other customers that are 5 days, 10 days past due that they wind up focusing on. And so they don't become the focus. And so really what winds up happening is that you're not only holding on to the account, but you're not really spending a lot of time focusing on them trying to collect. And while we understand that it costs 4 times to bring up costs 4 times to sign a new customer as it does to manage an existing customer, there's a point of no return. And what most collection agencies try to do is, number one, help salvage that relationship if possible, right? Because not every time you turn over a customer to a collection agency doesn't mean it's the end of doing business with that customer. The 30% of the accounts that we collect on wind up buying from our client once again, and we help reestablish that relationship. So, what we normally say, back to the original question, is you got to have some sort of rule that makes sense to your business that says if the customer meets this requirement, and this requirement, it should be sent out to a collection agency. Now, in addressing the issue about fees, many times people hold on to a file because they don't want to pay a collection fee. Well, would you rather have back 75% of your money or 0% of zero, right? And many times if you hold on to it too long, by the time you place it with a collection agency, it's out of business. And just to give you a little piece of information, we work with a trade association that has a lot of small members, and about half of the paper that they place with us is dead when we get it, uncollectible. These are all accounts that should have been placed earlier, but they weren't for some reason. And, you know, it's hard for us to be in our position and say you should place it earlier, but the general rule of thumb is 90 days, no payment, no order, no communication, your chances of getting paid are going down very quickly.
Sure, great. So I'm going to unmute it and open it to the floor for questions. So if you have a question, feel free to jump in and chime in. Definitely great insight, Sam.
Any questions? Looks like there's no questions, Eric.
All right, sure. Well, if you guys, I'll make sure that I send out a copy of the recording, also with Sam's contact. You know, we have a mutual respect for each other's companies. That's why we host these type of educational events. So feel free to reach out to us regarding, but we appreciate everyone's time.
Thank you very much. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
you.